Hi guys, welcome back to Econ Time with SK. So grab your notebooks, your favorite cup of coffee, and let's get started. Hi guys, in this video we are going to start our lecture series. So with this video we start our lecture series on perfect competition. Remember that in the last series of videos, we had looked at the cost structure of firms. So what we're going to be doing right now is we shall combine this with information on revenue in order to understand how firms make their decision. So what do we mean by firms making decision? Essentially, our focus is going to be, we're going to try and figure out how firms choose what quantity to produce in order to maximize their profit. All right, so let's get started. So I've seen a lot of students who will just memorize the features of the perfectly competitive firm, or they will call them assumptions, but not really see the wisdom of why they're there. So each one of these features actually has an implication for the analysis that we're going to be doing later. Okay, so first feature of a perfectly competitive market is that there are lots of buyers and there are lots of sellers. Okay, now, what is the implication of that? Well, if you've got many buyers and sellers, you realize that there's no one buyer which is strong enough in order to influence the market price. At the same time, there's no one seller who can sort of capture the market and then dictate the price. Okay, so that is exactly what is written down here. There's no one buyer who is who will buy enough so that they can influence the price. Okay, just think of an example like this. Let's say that a university, it's one of the biggest universities in a college town. So if it was to go and to the local store that sells computers, then it is one of the major buyers, right? So it could go to the computer store and sort of influence what price should be charged, because the university could just be like, hey, you know what, you either sell it to me at xxx price, or I'm going to take my business to the computer store in the next town, right? So that is not a perfectly competitive market. In a perfectly competitive market, there's so many buyers that no one single buyer can actually dictate or influence the price. At the same time, there are many sellers, right? So when there are many sellers, you can't have just one seller who goes and dictates what the market price will be. Okay, the next feature is goods that are offered for sale, they are actually identical. What that means is that the goods are homogeneous. It means that from the consumer's point of view, there is no difference between the rice that they're buying in shop 1 versus the rice they're buying in shop 2 versus the rice they're buying in shop 3, and so on and so forth. And then the third feature is that there are actually no barriers to entry and exit. Okay. What that means is that it's very easy for a perfectly competitive firm to set up, to start operations, and it's equally simple for them to just close down their business operations. Okay. It's not too costly to enter the market, nor is it too costly to exit the market. So think of something like this. I'm going to give you like a really silly example, but I just want you to imagine something like, let's say somebody wants to open up a tea stall. All right. So what do they need to do? Maybe, they're just going to need a bench where people can come and sit. They're going to need a stove. They're going to need some cupage, right? So some cutlery, cups, etc. They're of course going to need tea leaves, right? They're going to need sugar. So it's very easy, and it's easy to avail of these things. They're quite cheap. It's very easy to set up this tea stall and start operations. And at the same time, if the tea stall owner was like, hey, you know what, this is not profitable, I don't want to continue in this business, it is very easy for them to close things down. All they would have to do is sell the bench or give it to the next guy who wants to set up there, take the stove home or sell it. Same, just take the cutlery home, take the cups home, or just sell them right? And then business over. It's very easy to exit. Okay. On the other hand, if you think of high barriers to entry, let's say somebody wants to set up something similar to Amazon, right? Now that is very expensive because think of it, Amazon 2.0, it's going to be very challenging because the cost of setting up is so high, right? Because Amazon has huge warehouses, it has its own fleet of trucks with which it actually transports the goods, it even has its own planes. So you can tell that setting up something like Amazon 2.0 is going to be very expensive. So that is where we say there is high barrier to entry. Okay, so I already told you before that all of these features, they are important because they're going to influence how the perfectly competitive firm and the perfectly competitive market behaves. So just take feature one and feature two. Feature one and feature two ensures that the perfectly competitive firm, they are price takers. All right. It also ensures that consumers are price takers, right? They take the market price as given.
Another reason why these firms are price takers is because the goods that they're selling is identical, it is homogeneous. So let's say there's a shop one which is selling you shingara, okay, and there's no way that the first shop can convince you that the shingara that he's selling is different from a shop further down the line or the shop which is at the end of the market. So there are all these bunch of people who are selling shingara, but no one seller can claim that his shingara is very different from the next one or the next one or the next one. So in this case, when the goods are considered to be identical, then a shop owner cannot convince you that his good is different, which means he cannot convince you to pay a different price, pay a slightly higher price. This is another reason why all of these shops which are selling identical goods are price takers. Because if they were to charge a slightly different price, a higher price, you, the customer, would just move on to the competitors who are charging a lower price.
Now, when a firm takes the market price as given, do you know what that means? So let me just draw the market here. So being a price taker means that once the market has determined the price to be P1, the firm will just take this price, P1, and it can sell everything that it produces at this price. So this is actually the demand curve for the perfectly competitive firm. So this is the perfectly competitive market. Okay. And in the next video, we're going to discuss this perfectly elastic demand curve in greater detail. All right, guys, I shall see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.